32A3. Or really 30, no, sorry, 32A2. Okay, we were talking about the fact that on Rosh Hashanah, we need to talk about Malchiot. On Rosh Hashanah, we have to talk about Hashem's kingship. On Rosh Hashanah, we have to talk about Shofrot, Zechronot. There are certain things we have to say on Rosh Hashanah. But yesterday, we also spoke about, in Musaf, we mentioned Avot, we mentioned we talk about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, we talk about Gevurot, we talk about, Ata Gibor Olam Hashem, we talk about Hashem's might, which is the second bracha, which talks about the rain, it talks about Tchias HaMeitim, and we brought psukim for all those things. So on the bottom, on 32A2 on the first column, the bottom, how do we know where is the source? Where is the source? When the rabbi, where do you know? Where is it alluded to in psukim that you need to talk about Malchiot? You need to talk about the kingship of Hashem on Rosh Hashanah. You need to talk about the shofar. You have to not just blow the shofar. See, the Torah says, Yom Truah, it's a day of blowing, of making a day of sound, day of a crying sound. And how do you make the crying sound? We learn that the crying sound has to be done with a shofar. But how do we know you have to talk about? How do you know you have to verbalize verses that discuss the shofar? Sometimes you have a certain mitzvah to do. It's an act of a mitzvah. For instance, we have a mitzvah of tefillin this morning. We don't have to talk about the tefillin. We have to put on tefillin. You put on a talit. We don't have to talk about the talit. We have to put on a talit. There's an act of the mitzvah. Of course, you're supposed to have a certain mindset when you put on your tefillin, that you're thinking about Hashem's great power, that He went ahead and He took us out of Egypt. Right? The Torah says you should remember certain things when you're putting on the tefillin. But nevertheless, you don't have to say, there's nothing that you have to say about the tefillin. You say the Shema, that's a separate mitzvah. Sukkah, you have a mitzvah to sit in the sukkah next week. There's a certain mindset you're supposed to have when you sit in the sukkah, and I'm sitting in the sukkah. The Torah says, that you're supposed to have a mind, when you're sitting in the sukkah, that Hashem took us out of Egypt. When He took us out of Egypt, He placed us in some sort of sukkot. What does that mean? So one opinion in the Gemara is that, and that's the one that we go with, there were certain clouds that protected us from the heat of the day and from the coldness of the night. And we're commemorating that miracle by sitting in the sukkah. That's what the sukkah represents. It's like that protection that Hashem protected us. And we're supposed to think about that when we're in the sukkah. Because the Torah says, I want you to sit in the sukkah because I want you to remember, I want all the generations to remember the great miracles that happened to you when you were in the desert for those 40 years. So there is the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah. There's also a focus that something you're supposed to be thinking about. But you don't have to say it. You have no obligation to talk about the protection that happened. Rather, you have to think about it. Right? There's no biblical responsibility for you to talk about it. You need to think about it. But when it comes to this mitzvah of shofar, it's unique. It not only has this mitzvah of blowing the shofar, but you need to talk about verses about the shofar. It's interesting. We had not so long ago Pashas Ki Tavo. Pashas Ki Tavo had the mitzvah of bikurim, right? The first fruits, you had to go ahead and bring the first fruits of the 7 species that Israel is known for, right? When you plant a tree, and the date tree and olive tree, again, and every year there's fruits every year there's a new crop of fruits. Every year, those 7 species that Israel is known for, the pomegranates, the dates, the olives, so on, you have to take the first fruits and bring to the Beit HaMikdash, give to the Kohen. But there, you have a mitzvah called Bikurim, giving the fruits, but you also have a mitzvah to talk about of reading psukim from the Torah that discuss the idea that I came to the land of Israel and I'm bringing the fruits to Hashem. So sometimes there is an amirah, there is a speaking that accompanies a mitzvah, and sometimes it doesn't. So here the Gemara says, interesting that the mitzvah of shofar, not only do we have to blow the shofar, we have to talk about shofar. We have a mitzvah. That's why in the Musaf we have 10 verses that we mentioned verses that were compiled from Chumash, the Nevi'im Ketuvim, that talk about shofar. And similarly, we have 10 verses that talk about the Malchiot, Hashem's kingship. We have 10 verses that talk about Zechronot, certain remembering Hashem, psukim verses that discuss remembering Hashem, remembering Noach, and we should remember the us for a good year. So now the Gemara wants to know, where is the source for this law? Minayin, how do we know she'omrim malchiot? How do we know that what is the source for this? So the Gemara, Naish Omer malchiot, zichronot v'shofrot. How do we know that we have to talk about malchiot? Therefore, that's why it's very unique that the Musaf Shemona Esrei of Rosh Hashanah is the only Musaf. You have 9 brachot, right? What is it saying? Meaning this Shabbat, in general on Shabbat, every time you have 7 brachot in the Musaf, right? You have the 3 brachot called Logan Avraham, called Avot, Mechayim Meitim, and Kel HaKadosh, or Melech HaKadosh. You have the first 3 brachot, and the last 3 that are still in the middle bracha is unique. The middle bracha of the Amidah Musaf is called Kedushat Hayom. It's the bracha that talks about the holiness of the day. There we talk about the day. But on Rosh Hashanah, we have 3 blessings in the middle because they're connected with Malchiot, Shofrot, and Zechronot. That's why we got 9 blessings on the Musaf. You're wondering why is the Musaf different on Rosh Hashanah, that there's a 9 brachot, but we have 3 extra concepts that we have to talk about. The shofar is machas zechronot. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Diksiv, the pasuk says, the 7th month, the first of the month, that's the 7th month, the first of the month is Rosh Hashanah. As you know, the months go from Nisan. Nisan is month number 1, right? Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, of El Tishrei. We are now in the 7th month of the Jewish year. It happens to be the new year started. The year begins at Tishrei, 5,785. That's what we're in now. But when it comes to the months of the year, it starts from Nisan. Because Nisan is the month of the Exodus, and Hashem says, and God says, I want you to remember one of the ways, that's how the Ramban explains, the fact that we count months from Nisan, that means you're always remembering the Exodus, because you're counting month number 1 is the month that you came out from Egypt. Why is this the 7th month? Because we're counting 7th month from the Exodus in Nisan. So the 7th month, good morning. The 7th month, the first day is Rosh Hashanah. And what does the pasuk say? It said Shabbaton. It's a day of rest, right? On Rosh Hashanah, you're not allowed to do work, not do malacha. Zichron Truah Mikra Kodesh. And it says it's a Zichron Truah. Zichron is a mentioning of Truah. Mikra Kodesh, it's a holy day. Shabbaton, so the word Shabbaton, what is that referring to? Zeh Kedushat Hayom. The word Shabbaton is referring to the idea that it's referring to the bracha that you talk about the holiness of the day. The holiness of the day is today is a day of rest. That Rosh Hashanah is a day of rest from the normal type of work that you do. You're allowed to go ahead and cook. Certain things you're allowed to do on Rosh Hashanah, but generally you're not allowed to do malacha on Rosh Hashanah. It's a holy day. So Shabbaton is referring to the idea of it's a day of rest, and you have to talk about that point. You have to mention that point. You have to talk about it. That's the Kedushat Hayom. And Zichron, the word, it says Zichron, the pasuk says, Zichron is referring to Zichronot. You have to, morning, Mr. Haber. Great to see you. Zichron is referring to Zichronot, that you have to talk about verses that talk about zichronot, that talk about remembrances. Like I said, Hashem remembered Noach, remembering the Kedat Yitzchak, and Zacharti lo chesed nurayich. I remember Hashem remembers the kindness that we did in the desert. So with that word zichron alludes to the idea of zichronot that we have to talk about. And truah, and the word truah in the pasuk, the truah we know is referred to the crying sound. That's shofar, and that is shofrot. That is el shofrot, and you have to go ahead, and blow the shofar. So that is the how we understand the pasuk. So let's read the last thing again. Truah is elu shofrot. Now, Mikra Kodesh, the pasuk says that it's a Mikra Kodesh, that it's a calling of holiness. The day of Rosh Hashana is a calling of holiness. So, by the way, the Ramban says, very interesting, that when the Torah refers to the holidays, it's a days of Mikra Kodesh. It's a days of calling of holiness. So he says it's a day that we're called together, that we have to assemble together on the holiday. And that when people come to the synagogue on the holiday, that is part of the Mikra Kodesh. We're all it's like we're all called together. We go ahead and we say Hallel. So it comes out that when a person goes to the synagogue on Yom Tov, it's like a fulfillment of that mitzvah, of that biblical mitzvah of Mikra Kodesh. Because we're coming together, it's a calling of holiness. We come together and we say Hallel and other things that we say in the shul. Now, when the pasuk says Mikra Kodesh, it's the day of a calling of holiness. How do you make it holy? Kacheo, you make it holy by asiyat malacha. You make it holy by the fact that you don't do malacha, that you don't do work. You know, when the Torah says, don't do work, every time the Torah says on Yom Tov, you don't do work, Morning Stanley, the Torah connects the idea of refraining from work because it's a holy day. Why can't we work on Rosh Hashana? Why can't we do malacha on Yom Kippur? Why can't we work tomorrow? You know why can't we? It's a holy day. And therefore, really, every day of holiday, Sukkot is coming. Why can't we do work next week on Wednesday night, Thursday? Because it's a holy day. When something's a holy day, you take off from work. Take off from work because you focus in on the day. And therefore, that's what we have to remember. Every time we don't do work, we have to remember it's a holy day. Have a great day, everybody. Easy, fast, everything good for everybody. We'll be at a meeting, and we'll be back on Monday at our regular time, 6:45. Going back to regular time at 6:45 on Monday. Everybody's invited. Thank you very much.